My name is Rachel Rofe. I created this show because I wanted to help you see that if you have a choice, you can choose a better life. If you're listening to this podcast, you're in a pretty fortunate position. You have free will, ability to connect to the internet, and access to all kinds of new education. This podcast is meant to help you make the most of your good fortune. We talk with all kinds of people here from all walks of life because I want you to see that no matter what your situation, there's always a way to create a life that you're proud of. Hey, it's Rachel, and today we have the first part of a two-part interview with Steve Scott. And Steve is somebody that I've known for, probably a couple of years now, and I think he is just a spectacular guy. So his story is he has a bunch of books that he publishes on Kindle all about different habits. So how to create habits, how to get rid of bad habits, about exercise, different things you can do to make your life more spectacular. So he has that, and then with his business, he actually generates at least 5 figures per month. He's gone as high as nearly like $59,000 per month with his books. And they go anywhere from, like, the income that I've seen of his goes anywhere from $21,000 to $60,000 per month with these books. So in the first half of this interview, I just asked him a bunch of questions about his habits. So we talk about just what are habits, some examples of habits that are that can make major changes, and then how to start getting rid of bad habits in your life in a way that's actually sustainable. So Steve's not interested in cutting something out cold turkey. He doesn't think it works. He talks about willpower muscles and how it's often harder to make decisions and to implement habits later on in the day, which I think is some fascinating stuff. So we go all over that. And then in the second half of the interview, I ask him a bunch of questions around making money with Kindle, what he does, and some of his process. So I'll go into more of what you're going to get in that when that podcast comes out. So for now, enjoy this one about habits, and talk to you more soon. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Rachel.
Absolutely. So the intention behind the show, A Better Life, is to show people that if they have a choice, they can choose a better life. So in that spirit, can you take a minute to share with us some of the things that you're most proud of in your life?
I would say at the very core, just the idea that I've been able to take ideas out of my head and build a business around that. And I guess the kind of buzzword is the lifestyle business, the idea that I don't necessarily have to work at a 9-to-5 job. I can actually think of something, put it into an actual system, and actually generate income for it where I can live any part of the world. And I think there's a lot of things I'm pretty happy with my life, but that's the one I feel has really kind of determined the last 10 years and everything I've been able to achieve. So I'm pretty happy about that one.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome one. And I know that the business that you've created, you just went and hiked Mount, I never know how to say it. How do you say it? Kilimanjaro?
Oh, it's perfect. Kilimanjaro. Exactly like it's spelled.
That's so cool that you were able to do that. And you're always able to do these really fun things because you've created that life for yourself. So that would be an awesome thing to be proud of.
Yeah, definitely. And I think pretty much what you do with your podcast and your books and stuff, and perhaps a lot of people listening, that the idea that if you want something to actually structure your life around actually generating income, you can actually do these fun things and make money and actually get to, not necessarily travel, but also perhaps spend more time with your family and that sort of thing.
So this is going to be a 2-part interview, and as we talked about, the first half is going to be about just the habits that have helped you create to this lifestyle, and then the second part will be about the different things that you do for business. And just like I told you right before we started talking, I could ask you questions for hours, even just about your personal success habits. So, even just going through your books, I feel like you've shared so much stuff, and I'm just so excited to share your habit stuff with people because I think there's so much that they can learn. And the one thing I would love to just start with is you're obviously really into habit setting. So can you just break it down even to the very basic at first? What is a habit to you and why do you think they're important to look at?
I would say a habit could be something you do on a regular basis and on almost a subconscious level. So I think a lot of people would define the habit as something you do every single day, whereas I would define it as something that you can consistently do without really thinking. So a few examples, obviously brushing your teeth would be a daily habit, whereas I would consider exercise a habit as well, not even if you don't necessarily do it every single day. So for me, I would consider running a major habit I've built in my life, but I only run 4 times a week. But I know that almost on an instinctual level, I just make time for running without even thinking about it. And when it's time for running, I'm able to do it without having to really feel the need to have motivation or any other sort of inspiration. I just know that when it's time to run or when it's time to write or when it's time to do a certain habit, I just go out and do it. And I kind of mentioned the word motivation before, and I think a lot of times people, I guess the kind of New Year's resolution idea that people think you need a lot of motivation to do certain activities, but when you turn it into a habit, you don't really have to rely on motivation because you kind of build that muscle memory of doing it on a consistent basis.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of your books, Habit Stacking, you talked about how you can set all kinds of habits in less than 5 minutes a day. Do you think that you can make lasting change in your life with habits that are 5 minutes or less?
Yes, and actually, when that book's always brought up, I'm very transparent. There's a lot of things I didn't quite really explain as best as I could, so I'm actually doing a revised version as we speak, so hopefully that'll be out in a couple months. But I guess the reason I mention that is because there are a couple of habits in there in retrospect that perhaps maybe they couldn't be done as well in 5 minutes or less, but I do think that there is a number of habits you can do in a short amount of time. The kind of idea behind habit stacking is just group a bunch of these small habits, create one trigger for a routine, and just run through that routine. And another good example of that would be Hal Elrod's Morning Miracle. I know you're a fan of his as well, and he has this whole ritual that you follow on a daily basis for 1 hour. I think he uses the savers analogy, but anyway, the point is there's a number of habits you can build into your morning routine that you can use to benefit your life. So the examples I use in the book is you can take a look at your goals, you can review them. For me, my business runs on a lot of stats and metrics, so I like to do a quick 5 to 10 minute review of all my stats and metrics in the morning. And there's just simple things like making a protein shake or some type of healthy shake. Perhaps use the Mindspace app and open that up and do a little bit of meditation. So the idea there is you can do a number of small habits and group them together, and it's almost like you kind of do this emotional charge where you feel like you do a number of small wins, and by the time you're done with the beginning of your day, you feel kind of inspired to start kind of carrying on with the rest of your daily activities.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm glad you brought up Savers, which, by the way, Hal also just had me on his podcast. I'm so excited. Yeah, I joined you on the interviews. I'm pretty sure that he released yours. I haven't listened to it yet, but I think it's on my excited to listen to list. So I like how you mentioned, actually, before I even get into that, so the Savers thing is awesome, and for those of you who have listened to the podcast with Hal that I did, he talks about how even just 6 minutes, if you do 1 minute for each of those things, you can still create really lasting change. And then you also even mentioned just brushing your teeth. That's a really good one, under 5 minutes. That lasts, makes big change. You mentioned also doing them in the morning, and I agree. I think it's the easiest to do it in the morning, and I think you explained this really well in Bad Habits No More about the willpower muscle. Can you explain about that?
Yeah, I've actually done a lot of reading on willpower and bad habits, and it's a great book, and I always butcher his name, but there's a book literally called just Willpower. It's written by Baumeister and Tierney. They did a great book about willpower, and they just explain the idea of ego depletion, that pretty much everything you do on a daily basis, every decision you make, every time you decide that I need to go running, when you're at your work, you're always exerting willpower because you have to make a number of micro decisions, and you're constantly doing stuff. And just all this stuff in a given day all draws from the same reservoir of willpower. So you find at the end of the day, you're tired. That's why a lot of people tend to argue at the end of the day with their spouse. They come home from a long day and someone says the off comment, next thing you know, they're in a fight they didn't even want to get into. Just the idea there that you're constantly withdrawing from this pool of willpower, it's just hard to continuously exert it over a 12, 14, 16 hour, however long you're awake over that period of the day. So the idea of, once you understand how ego depletion works, it's almost really intelligent to really do your high energy, your high level stuff, the stuff that really is the most important for your business or your life, and do those first things in the morning. And I guess that's kind of a quick explanation of why Hal's stuff is actually, I really enjoy it myself, just because the fact that you don't leave everything up to chance and to random obstacles that might encounter during your day. You just get up, you do that routine, and know that no matter what, you've got that routine done, and then you can carry on with the rest of your day. And I guess a further that example is, for me, writing is something I know is really important for my business. So as soon as I'm done with my morning routine, I just go immediately into writing, just because I know that it's really important for my business, and I don't want anything to interfere with it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I actually just wrote an article about how, for me, like doing the hardest or the most creative thing first is so much more beneficial, because after that, it's like the thinking is completely shot, at least for me. Do you know, I don't know if you know, but is it possible to grow more willpower, or do we all have a finite amount?
I would say so. This is just my opinion. I say so. I have literally no scientific study to back it up, nothing to really show that. But I find that for me, just the more structure you put into your daily life, it's almost like once you get used to, I don't want to use the word habit because we're going to say it over and over, but once you get used to the routine of it, being fairly disciplined, it's easier to be a little more disciplined in other areas of life. I think discipline begets discipline. That kind of the early example for me where I learned how to be disciplined was with running, and every other area of my life was kind of a nightmare, but I kind of took that, what makes me a successful runner, how can I apply that to other areas of my life? And now that I'm pretty successful at writing, I can kind of say to myself, hey, I'm pretty disciplined with these two things, why can't I be disciplined with these other areas? And for me, I just think that kind of the mantra I have for my blog, which I really do believe, is you kind of can build a better life one habit at a time, that over time you can slowly make small incremental positive changes into your life. I don't necessarily know if this really means you building up willpower, but I know that you can get a lot more disciplined over time. Just learn when you need to turn on the kind of get things done mentality, and when you know how to turn things off and just kind of relax and just have fun.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was thinking discipline really does beget more discipline, and the more discipline that you have, the less willpower that you even need because you know exactly what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I used that analogy before, but with exercise, I don't really ever feel like I need to really be disciplined about that, because I know if I can't go running, it was really snowy today, so I was disciplined enough that knowing that it was going to be no way to run outside, so I went to the gym and ran there, and I walked around for a couple miles. And so it's just something I know it'll happen. I just don't know when. It just matters just figuring out what time of day. But the idea of just kicking myself in the butt, I've been fortunately been able to get past that point in my life, and I just know it'll happen. Just don't know when.
That's great. And something that surprised me in your book, you mentioned how you don't recommend the cold turkey technique. And I'd love to know, and so for those listening, cold turkey, just giving something up altogether. So I'd love to know more behind why you think that.
That's honestly, and I'll be very honest, it's definitely my opinion, and there's some people, I'm sure there's been plenty of studies have shown that just going cold turkey is more effective. I know from dealing with people on just a day-to-day basis that just even if you go on Facebook, you see these people after New Year's, I'm going to do all this, I'm never going to eat sweets again. And the problem with cold turkey is there's no wiggle room. That either when they have the all or nothing, they really have no backup plan for when they fail, and people always invariably fail. If you say to yourself you're never going to smoke a cigarette again, that when you decide one day it's been a crap day, you're really stressed out, you've been good all week, but suddenly you just need a cigarette, you have no backup plan for when that happens. And then as soon as you smoke a cigarette or two, there's something that happens called the what the hell effect, and I wrote a little bit about that. That's the I got that from the Willpower book, but really what the hell effect is generally that's when you do one thing, you're like, well, I already broke my commitment, so screw it, I'm gonna smoke a bunch of cigarettes because I've already failed with this, so I might as well just enjoy my cigarette time now. And I guess the point behind the cold turkey and why I'm not really for it is because there really is no sort of kind of incremental weaning off of a particular bad habit. You're not really planning for those times when you fail, and everyone fails, everyone makes mistakes, everyone has a misstep. When you fail, if you just beat yourself up, you're really not going to be able to change your life.
Yeah, I mean, you're making me think about dieting and how, yeah, totally. Someone might eat something and then be like, forget it. I'm done with this diet. I'm not good. I've already failed. I'm just going to eat like crap for the rest of the day. So I think that's a really good point. And I remember I was talking with my nutritionist who was saying, instead of not eating stuff that is bad, just add more greens. It just makes it easier.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I would say for me, my biggest personal challenge is my dietary habits. And I don't necessarily always try to necessarily exclude certain foods. Now I'm just trying to eat better, like you said, eat more greens or eat more positive foods. And then by the time your belly's full, I don't really need that, those stack of fries. Right now I'm kind of full. And it's just the idea there, it's almost better to substitute a bad habit instead of trying to just forever forswear it so you'll never do it again. Just try to find the times where you do certain bad habits and maybe do slight replacements. Just over time you'll find that you will make those small incremental changes.
Yeah, and especially if the replacements are pleasurable, it's then you're not punishing yourself and it becomes a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it's there's a good analogy I once heard, something like, I won't think of white elephants, or I won't think of something like the idea if you introduce a thing, you're going to end up thinking about that, and you're going to your mind's just going to do this loop where you're constantly thinking about that. So if you tell yourself, I'm not going to eat that, I'm trying to think, I'm not going to have a bowl of ice cream, you keep on telling yourself, you're really just going to start really thinking about that, and next thing you know, you're just finding yourself almost instinctively going over to the freezer and grabbing a bowl of ice cream.
Totally, totally.
I'm in the mood for ice cream now.
Right? I know. I was thinking about ice cream as you were talking too. That's really funny. Like, oh, that would be really yummy. Another part of your book that I really loved in Bad Habits No More, you were talking about habit loops and the cue, reward, and routine. Can you explain like a little bit more about what those are? Maybe using your cell phone example as an example here.
That's actually, I tend to find really great books and try to like do a summary in some of my books. So I originally learned about that from The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and that's a great book. I would say the best piece of content is the last 5 to 10 pages of that book, so if you ever read that, really go. Make sure you read all the way to the end because he has a lot of good effective strategies. What he talks about is the kind of the habit loop. There's the actual cue, there's the routine that you follow, and there's the reward that you achieve. The example I used in the book is I got rid of a bad habit that I had, and the bad habit that I had was I just found myself at 8 o'clock at night kind of fumbling through my phone, just, playing trivia for crack, or just doing stupid stuff that doesn't really add value to my life, looking at email, checking Facebook. And that was the only couple hours I had to spend with my fiance, and it was affecting my relationship. So instead of trying to get rid of that habit, I won't actually look at my phone from this time. I decided to just develop a new habit of going to my office every single night and plugging into the wall and just leaving it there for that 12 hours. But anyway, getting back to the point, the cue, routine, reward. The cue is the actual the thought that you have, or the environment that you're in, or something that people say. Whenever you feel a sensation to do a bad habit, there's something that happens that precedes it. So it's something, a thought that pops in your mind, or something people said, like I mentioned before. And there's the actual routine that you follow. So as an example, whenever I wanted to look at my phone, there's sometimes a thought that pops in my head, and what's going on Facebook? So that would be the cue. And the routine was I would look at Facebook, and for me, the reward, it was the actual sensation of, for me, I realized it kind of relieved some sort of tension. Like I was worried about some aspect of my business, so the actual reward I felt was the actual, all right, everything's good, I'm all right, but then an hour later I'd feel the same reward. I kind of butchered this explanation a little bit, but I guess the idea there is you really kind of want to understand what's going on around you, why you're actually doing this routine. A lot of times when there's a bad habit, it's not the actual reward that you're seeking, it's something else, maybe subconsciously, you're not really aware of. And what Charles Duhigg recommends, and what I've done myself, is just start writing down all these feelings and stuff that popped up in your head, and just try experimenting with different routines, and perhaps they can generate the same reward.
Yeah, so I don't think you butchered it. I think that makes perfect sense. And in your book, you were talking about how when you have the cue, record the triggers, which is the location, wherever you are, when you have that sensation that you want to do something, the time, your mood, the people around you, and what the actual action was. Do you remember what yours were for the cell phone?
I'm trying to think. A lot of stuff that popped in my head was, I'm bored right now, whatever's on TV isn't that good, so I realized that maybe I should turn on the TV and actually engage Kristen in the conversation. A lot of times it is just anxiety about my business. I think anyone that's an entrepreneur always feels some level of anxiety, no matter how well you do that. Oh my Lord, I haven't checked in a couple hours, something bad must happen. And really, nothing bad's going to happen from 8 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning. Really, it's not the end of the world. You don't necessarily have to check your stats that much. And that's one of the worst habits I have, is the constantly stat checking. So there's that. It's, I sent out that email about this whatever. I wonder if they email me back. So it's stuff like that. I was always able to put away my laptop, but I almost used my cell phone as a surrogate for checking out what's going on in my business, and I realized that it's not like I could ever actually take action on anything after 8, 9 o'clock at night unless it's like a super emergency, which really hasn't happened in a long time. So why do I even look at it? So what am I actually achieving from this? And it's more just a kind of relieving tension and boredom. So I realized that just almost forcing myself to physically, bodily remove the phone from my immediate vicinity, that really was the simple solution to that.
Yeah, and I like how you had mentioned how you tried a couple different things first. You were disabling the apps, have your fiance hide the phone and different things, and then you just realized kind of what was going on for you. And so you put the phone away, but also, like you had mentioned in the book about how, in the mornings it would be by your bed and you just look at it, and instead now, like you go for a quick walk right away. So you replaced it with something that feels great.
Truth be told, the last month or two, the walk has kind of gone. It's too icy and snowy out there, but I'm actually really psyched because it's March when we're recording this, so I know snow has to end sometime soon. So I'm looking forward to get back and doing my regular morning walks again.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, I have been in a ton of Fitbit challenges lately with people that are on the East Coast, and I can't believe they're getting so many steps because it was cold here just for a few days, and it's like, this sucks.
I think last time I checked, because for people listening, we're Fitbit buddies, so I think you and Don, I've checked, and it's just, you guys are killing me lately.
Oh, yeah, well, no, I'm just kidding. I was super, super competitive last week. I got all the way to 190,000 steps for the week, which is like over a half marathon every single day. And yeah, and this week I was just like, I'm getting a little bit burnt out. So now I'm about 18,000 steps a day, and I'm just going to like hold there for a little bit. I'm actually, even as we're talking, pacing so I can get some steps.
I'm actually looking, you're at 100,000 for this week so far.
Well, yeah, because since Saturday, I was just like, forget it. I think over the whole weekend, I got 7,000 steps. I was so burnt out, my feet hurt. And then since Monday, I've been back to like getting my 18 at least.
Nice.
Awesome. So something else that you mentioned that I think is so helpful in your book is the if-then plans. So can you tell us about them?
As far as the if-then plans, it's really just kind of how you handle obstacles. And for me, I found that sometimes it's not just about developing the habits, it's also knowing what to do when you encounter certain obstacles. Really, any sort of obstacles could be anything that prevents you from doing a habit. So, not too sure if I use this analogy in the book, but I know I've used another piece of content. But a good example of an obstacle is, say you're trying to reduce the amount that you drink. You know that you're starting to recognize that, hey, I've been drinking a lot too much lately. I need to get a handle on this area of my life. And once you sit down, you figure out your cue, your routine, your reward. You figure out what are some obstacles that throw my way when I'm trying to reduce or eliminate this habit. So one of the examples I used in a piece of content was your buddy Dave or something. He calls you up and says, hey, look, we're going to O'Brien's pub. You want to join us? So an if-then statement would be something like, if Dave calls me to go out, I will respond with this. Or that if Dave calls me up to do this, then I will respond with X. And a good example I use is, knowing that Dave is someone who also likes to go out for walks or hikes, if Dave calls me to go out to O'Brien's pub, then I will ask him to go out for a hike instead. So the example there is you almost want to figure out all these different obstacles that are always constantly thrown your way, and have actually almost like a loop where you know that you will execute this type of plan. And obviously sometimes you're not going to follow through, but you'd be surprised that once you actually know how to handle certain situations, you're more prepared to actually do the right thing.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember reading about it in Tim Ferriss's book too. He says that we have these things we want to create, and we start getting so just thrown out by worry. And if you instead just think of, okay, well, what is the worst case scenario that can happen? Usually it's not even as bad as you think. But then if you start having these things, like you're saying about, like, if X thing happens, this is how I'll respond. If this happens, this is how I'll respond. And then you can just go into things so much more confidently versus being a victim. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that's actually helped me personally as well. Like you said with the Tim Ferriss, that was 4 Hour Workweek, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a great example that you used. It's like once you really sit and think about all the things that could happen, a lot of times your anxiety is way worse than what actually is reality. I just like the idea that once you actually have these plans put in place, you generally will do what you need to do.
Absolutely. So for our last question in this section, it's something that I'm just personally curious about because there's so much controversy around this lately, it seems. For you, do you think that you can, someone really can have it all? And what I mean is, when I look at your book, Level Up Your Day, it talks about leveling up your energy and eating, exercise, routine activities, productivity, fun. Do you think that you can, have every area of your life operating the way you want it?
I would say it really depends. I would say it's a work in progress, and I'm pretty transparent to the fact that there are some areas of my life I'm still working on that I think there are times where you are kind of firing all cylinders, but there would be sometimes kind of different seasons of your life where sometimes your exercise will take a backseat to the actual business aspect of your life. And then, yeah, there will be some weeks where you're really just nailing it, and there's some weeks where your motivation's in the gutter, and just nothing seems to be working. So I would say it's really, for me, I feel it's an ongoing process, and I think people should be striving to always improve themselves to the day they die. And I would say, to answer your question, I would say yes, sometimes you will be doing it all, and then sometimes you won't be.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually, and I love that you answered that. And I know one of the things that you mentioned that I'm totally on board with is just making it about the journey. So not always trying to be this like perfect human being, but taking time to also enjoy like little things in life. And actually, that was supposed to be the last question, but you threw in sometimes your motivation's in the gutter. So I'm curious for you, what do you do when your motivation's in the gutter?
Actually, it's funny you asked that because when I got back from Kilimanjaro, I don't want to get into weird psychoanalysis, but I had depression sometimes, and I've actually learned, because actually that's one of the reasons I got really into habits, because I didn't know how to actually handle on a regular basis besides take medications. I learned that having all these routines kind of just forced myself into activity and in action. But when I got back from Kilimanjaro, I was just really experiencing a severe lack of motivation. I would say for a week and a half, I really just couldn't do anything. I think just part of it was just the weather. What did the trick for me was just simply, I don't know if this will work for everyone, but just finding the simplest thing to do, kind of remembering what it's like to do those on a regular basis. So how I kind of got back into my business was, instead of just trying to get out there and write or create podcasts or stuff that I know required a high level of energy, just simply, and it sounds dumb, just simply I just went through my inbox and just started answering emails, and I just committed to doing that for 1 hour for the day. I'm like, you know what, all right. And then the next day, I'm starting to remember what I like. And then just something just happened where I was just able to kind of keep myself busy by just doing very basic stuff. Eventually, I was like, all right, no, I'm fired up now. I saw something that kind of like got me like really energized, and I kind of built on that. So I don't know if that's a good answer for everyone. I just find that just doing the simplest things sometimes is when you're really feeling down. Just try doing something. Try taking some action.
You know, I actually think that's a great answer. And I remember Tim Ferriss said the same thing. He said when he feels like his life is just like spiraling out of control, so it could either be like when you have no motivation or you're like just super, like everything's going crazy. He said for him, like just the act of making his bed was so huge for him because he knew that he had at least control over one single area of his life. It helped propel him into more and more and more. So I can see that playing exactly in your situation too. And I'm going to have to try it the next time I'm not motivated.
Yeah. No, I think I remember reading something on his blog where, a really candid article too, he talked about like how he needs a head case sometimes, and somehow like one day he just spent a whole day crying and stuff like that. It was really enlightening because we tend to put these people on pedestals. We don't realize that they have off days as well, that they have just some days where it's just nothing seems to work. And it is the reminder that we all kind of go through this journey. It's not like no one's perfect. I'm sure Tony Robbins has a less than perfect day. He just probably doesn't talk about it.
I totally agree, and I too read that article. I'll link it in the show notes. It was awesome. He said it was one of his most popular articles, and I thought it was just so freeing, like talking about how entrepreneurs can go through anxiety and depression, and it can be, it's such a roller coaster world, or can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's almost like the other side of the coin. It's when you're really in entrepreneurial mindset, you tend to deal in a lot of highs, but the problem is when you deal with a lot of highs, sometimes there's some lows. For me, I'm always constantly roller coaster of like days I feel great and the days where I'm like, oh man, nothing seems to work. So I don't know. I think there must be something psychological about just the mentality of entrepreneurs and how they experience those highs and lows.
I think so too.
Thank you so much for listening to A Better Life. You can find all show notes for this episode at rachelroffe.com. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe so you can automatically get access to all new shows. Let's also connect. Just go onto Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram /RachelRoffe, and we can talk there. The opinions of all guests here are their own, and I'm not necessarily endorsing any of them. I do want to give you perspective, though. And always remember, if you have a choice, choose a better life.